Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone holds a very special place in the hearts of those who grew up reading J.K. Rowling's world-famous series about a young boy who goes to magic school. Of all the books in the series, the first one is the most evidently for children in terms of the pacing, the absence of mature content, and the fact our hero is only 11. Having said that, there's no denying adults can love this book too, and it's not just about nostalgia. Even adults who didn't read the series growing up are often surprised by how much they enjoy their first foray into the magical world. So the question arises as to why this is the case. What is it about the first book that hooks in readers across the globe regardless of their age? This is the question I'm going to answer in this video, and for those of you interested in the writing process, my hope is that this video will enlighten you somewhat in regard to the techniques Rowling is using and the effect they have. Please, as always, let me know what you think of my ideas, and feel free to leave your own as well. I always enjoy reading what you think. I'm going to focus on 4 areas, or titles might be a better way of putting them: a sympathetic protagonist, a magical world within our own, world building, and mystery. So to begin with, in almost every story, both by page and screen, it is essential to make your audience care about what happens to your central character, and a great way to do that is to have your audience feel sorry for them. Harry, as an orphan, automatically generates sympathy. Sure, having a hero whose parents are dead is not very original. You see it all the time, for instance in The Kingkiller Chronicle by Patrick Rothfuss, A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket, and also in older stories such as The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett or Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. It's a tried and tested trope that is cliché but also effective. Like most of the books I just mentioned, the orphan is made to suffer further by facing adversity whilst they are growing up. All this accumulates in a great feeling of sympathy that, regardless of what age you are, makes you feel sorry for Harry, and the bulk of this is done in the first 2 chapters alone. So already you care about this child, you want something good to happen to him, you are invested in his story, and that's the key. Bearing this in mind, my second point is something that doesn't get talked about enough, and I think it's a key component as to why not just the Philosopher's Stone, but why the whole series has been so successful. Most fantasy books take place in a completely fictional universe, and there's nothing wrong with this. Harry Potter, on the other hand, starts in the real world and then goes into the magical world. This is often referred to as portal fantasy. 2 other obvious examples would be The Chronicles of Narnia and The Wizard of Oz. However, Harry Potter is still slightly different to both of these examples because the magical world isn't actually a separate world, it's embedded within our own, only it's hidden. Now the practical impact of this is that it makes it feel more real, like it really could exist. There's a reason you hear people say, "I'm still waiting for my letter to Hogwarts." It's an easy thing to imagine because the magical world isn't a separate world at all, and that's what makes Harry Potter different from other fantasy titles. So if we bring together what's been said so far, the combination of a protagonist you care about and a hidden rather than a separate world makes for a firm foundation with which to build a deeply immersive story. Now I say foundation because these 2 things alone are not enough to carry an entire book. Thankfully, Rowling's world building continues to add to this terrific premise. This is something Rowling doesn't get enough credit for, and I think it's because people can get confused between detail and scale. Rowling's world is not as big as Middle-earth or Westeros or the 4 corners of civilization. The amount of detail she gives is outstanding, particularly given that the Philosopher's Stone is a children's book. As soon as the story enters the magical world, we're introduced to some great detail, and it's the smaller things that really make the story come to life. So, for instance, Harry's list of school supplies. I particularly like how Rowling invents fictional books as well, including the author's name. And then on the train we get a whole list of magical sweets that Harry buys for himself and Ron. In this sense, Rowling is demonstrating the nuances of her world which help bring it to life. I also want to highlight the houses because they really exemplify the depth of Rowling's world building. Here in the UK, all schools have houses of some sort, but they're literally just a way of dividing up students. They don't really have any significance beyond the occasional competition. At Hogwarts, each house has a colour scheme and an animal that represents it. The house you're sorted into is dependent upon the individual's own traits. Each house has their own head, their own common room, their own ghost, their own Quidditch team. There's even an entire backstory about the 4 Hogwarts founders concerning the disagreement between Slytherin and the others that comes up in the next book. My point is that Rowling's world building is anything but shallow. There are layers and layers to her world that are remarkably deep despite the fact the book's primary audience is children. Of course there are many examples of detail I could give, these are just a few that I picked out to exemplify my point. So after hooking you in with such a strong premise, the reader is then treated to some exceptional world building in Diagon Alley and especially at Hogwarts. And to top it all off, there's even an enticing mystery as well. The mystery in the Philosopher's Stone is actually my favourite of the entire series other than the Goblet of Fire, which is absolute genius. I'll get to that in another video. The key question or questions in the Philosopher's Stone is what is under the trapdoor and who is trying to steal it. It's these questions that really drive the plot and form the basis of Harry's curiosity throughout the book. Now the first of these questions, what is the dog guarding essentially, isn't really possible to work out on your own. It's more something that steadily unfolds, but it still makes for a gripping question all the same. As to the question of who is trying to steal the stone, the clues here are well laid out. The first major one is that Quirrell is in Diagon Alley the same day Gringotts is broken into, which we know because Harry is introduced to him in the Leaky Cauldron by Hagrid just before he enters Diagon Alley. Quirrell is also the one who informs the rest of the school that there is a troll in the dungeon, and in hindsight you realise the reason he was the first to inform the others about the troll was because he let it in himself. And the final clue is during the Quidditch match when Harry's broom starts to lose control, Hermione knocks over Quirrell whilst running to set Snape's robes on fire. Now these clues are subtle, but when the truth is revealed at the end, rather than feeling cheated, the reader is hit with a sense of realisation and enlightenment. But the twist that Quirrell is after the stone is still a twist because the first time reading the book there are plenty of red herrings that Snape is the guilty one. As well as being a generally nasty character, Snape receives a bite from Fluffy which suggests he's after the stone, and again during the Quidditch match it appears he is the one causing Harry's broomstick to try and buck him off, when in reality he's muttering the counter curse. As such, Rowling does a great job at misleading while still giving a satisfactory plot twist, one that makes sense and is clear when reading the novel for the second time. So those are my thoughts on the Philosopher's Stone. I really do love this book, even if it isn't my favourite of the series. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd be really interested to know your thoughts. Of course I couldn't cover everything that's great about this book. I like to keep my videos relatively succinct. So I hope you didn't mind that I didn't cover everything, but I think it's impossible to cover everything in one video. Other than that, it's goodbye from me until next time.